All right, let's get into it. Today, we are taking a deep dive into Fyodor Dostoevsky's Crime and Punishment. And trust me, this is not your high school book report. We're going to explore why this story has been a kind of psychological gauntlet for readers for, well, over 150 years.
And just to give you an idea of what I mean, take a look at what people are saying about it today. This quote from a Reddit forum, it pretty much perfectly captures the novel's reputation. This is not a light read. It's a book that gets under your skin, and honestly, it stays there.
And this is a really common feeling. People talk about this emotional weight, this sense that the main character's struggles, his anxiety, his paranoia, his guilt, somehow become your own. It forces you to look inward, to confront your own ideas of right and wrong. It's relentless, it's super personal, and it's something you just don't forget.
So that's the big question, isn't it? How does a 19th century novel about a crime in St. Petersburg still hit so hard, feels so real? Well, to figure that out, we have to go beyond the crime itself. We have to get inside the mind of the criminal. The secret is really in how the story is told. It's not your typical whodunit. I mean, we know who the killer is right from the start. Instead, what Dostoevsky gives us is a whydunit. It's a deep psychological dive into the motive behind the crime. And that motive, it all starts with a very dangerous idea. So let's meet our guy. His name is Rodion Raskolnikov. He's this brilliant but flat broke ex-student living in a tiny coffin-like apartment in the slums of St. Petersburg. He's totally isolated, he's hungry, and he spent way too much time alone, stewing over this radical theory he's cooked up. And at the absolute core of his motive is this idea he has, the extraordinary man theory. It's this belief that certain exceptional people, well, they're just above the moral laws that bind the rest of us. It's a philosophy that can justify almost anything. So in Raskolnikov's mind, he divides the whole world in two. On one side, you've got your ordinary people. They're just, material for history. But on the other side, you have the extraordinary figures, the Napoleons of the world. And he believes these people have an inner right to break any rule, even commit murder, if it helps them achieve their world-changing goals. So what does he do? He decides to test this whole theory on himself. He picks a target, an old pawnbroker, a woman he sees as a worthless parasite, basically a louse. His plan is to murder her, to prove to himself that he is one of these extraordinary men, a Napoleon in the making. But the second he actually does it, his cold, intellectual theory just slams headfirst into the messy, chaotic reality of having a conscience. The crime is over, but the real story, the punishment, is just getting started. And this is where you see Dostoevsky's genius. Instead of feeling powerful like Napoleon, Raskolnikov is thrown into this absolute nightmare of psychological torture. He's not just worried, he's physically falling apart. He's got a fever, he's delirious, he's gripped by a paranoia so intense he can barely function. And, of course, he ends up pushing away everyone he loves. So here's the key takeaway. The real punishment isn't the police or the courts. It's the inescapable prison of his own mind. His guilt is this force that's way more powerful than any law, and it's just eating him alive from the inside out. Dostoevsky showed us, long before Freud came along, that the worst punishment is always the one that comes from within. His subconscious is basically at war with his intellect, and you see this so brilliantly in his dreams. They completely expose his inner conflict. The most famous one is this horrifying dream from his childhood, where he watches a crowd brutally beat a horse to death. It foreshadows his own violent act with the axe. It's like his own mind is trying to warn him, and later, to torture him. Now, what's so fascinating is how Dostoevsky could write about this kind of suffering with such terrifying accuracy. Well, it wasn't just imagination. He was pulling it directly from his own incredibly traumatic life experiences. You see, as a young man, Dostoevsky was arrested and actually sentenced to death. They let him out to be shot, he went through the final rites, and only at the very last second was his sentence changed by the Tsar. This horrifying mock execution, it left a permanent psychological scar, and it completely shaped how he saw life, death, and faith. After that, he spent 4 years in a hard labor camp in Siberia, living right alongside murderers and thieves. And that experience, it just shattered his youthful socialist ideals. It forced him to confront the darkest, but also the most spiritual parts of human nature. This became the raw material for all of his greatest work. And this belief that Dostoevsky forged in prison, this idea that suffering can actually be transformative,
That becomes the absolute key to how the novel ends and how Raskolnikov finds his way forward.
Raskolnikov's intellectual pride, his belief that morality is basically meaningless, that's what led him to kill. So his path to redemption has to come from the complete opposite. And he finds it in the character of Sonia. She's a young woman who's been forced into prostitution to support her family, and she embodies everything he isn't: humility, faith, and unconditional compassion.
What's amazing is that Sonia doesn't judge Raskolnikov for what he's done. Instead, she sees his suffering, and through her deep Christian faith, she shows him the only way out, the only path to a kind of spiritual rebirth. She tells him not to run, but to confess his sin out loud, in public, and to accept his punishment.
And that's really the novel's ultimate argument. When Raskolnikov finally confesses and accepts his sentence to Siberia, he's not just paying a debt to society. He's starting this painful, difficult process of his own regeneration, of shedding his pride and finally reconnecting with his own humanity.
And so this is what the book really leaves you with. It suggests that maybe it's only by confronting our own pain, by actually enduring the consequences of what we do, that we can overcome our pride, face down our inner demons, and find a way back to ourselves. It's a heavy question for sure, and it's the reason people are still wrestling with this masterpiece long after they've turned the final page.